Voice 17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Greetings and salutations, my friends. Welcome again to the Richard James Show. We are still in the throes of Black History Month. Every year, we get the shortest month of the year to celebrate Black history. Black history is indeed American history and world history. We are an intricate part of what civilization has done and what civilization is doing, past and moving forward. And what we're going to do is to speculate and to present to you many of the individuals who are part of our struggle for freedom and emancipation. You see, to talk about African American history, you have to talk about the discrimination. You've got to talk about the way our people have been treated. And what I want to do is to raise up to you some of the individuals that have fought to make us free, the emancipation, freedom, justice, and equality. Some of those individuals have paid for it with their lives. Many of the people who have set forth and tried to do positive things have been killed, assassinated, and that's a fact. And then some of them have lived to be very, very old people. That's a fact also. But it's important that we document our own history. I understand that
You still there, Rich? Again, our apologies. Again, you're in tune to the Richard James Show here on the Voice 17104.com. Again, I think we're experiencing some technical challenges momentarily, temporarily here. So bear with us as we get Mr. James back on the line, airing live for this part two of this Black Leaders celebrating Black leaders during Black History Month 365 right here on the Voice 17104.com. So we will be right back, and we'll be featuring more of this part two with Richard James during the Richard James Show. So whatever you do, please don't touch that dial. Right ahead, Rich. We lost you there for a second.
Okay, yeah. So we want to start out with some individuals that you may have heard of. Let's start out with the former president of the Congo, and he's an individual that we talked about before. His name was Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba led the freedom struggle in the Congo. The background and the history of what Europeans had done in the Congo was absolutely abhorrent. They took a whole country, committed genocide with over a couple of million people killed, people abused, right hands cut off. The King of Belgium declared the whole country, his own. Other Europeans agreed to that at the German conference, in which they pulled together and they tried to divide up the world. And Belgium was given the Congo. The people in the Congo never agreed to it. So they fought and set up a resistance. Finally elected Patrice Lumumba, and then he was assassinated. He was killed. He was murdered. There's been different reads on exactly what happened, but we know that somehow this happened. Patrice Lumumba, and he's beginning to receive more acclaim now for the things that he done. That's in Africa, that he was the president of the Congo. Moving right here, some of the other individuals that we dealt with in terms of our history are individuals within the continental United States. Last week we talked about Du Bois, but Du Bois had an ongoing rivalry with another gentleman who was a master of race development in the field of education. Cast down your buckets where you may. This man was a man by the name of Booker Powerful Washington, and he was the principal developer, organizer of Tuskegee Institute. Tuskegee Institute was more of a trade school than a university or college, but it was the same. But they taught folks how to agriculture, one of the main core of that. Also, Tuskegee Institute trained airplane pilots. You've heard of the Tuskegee Airmen. Well, that was instituted as Tuskegee. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was one of the most conscientious, people-oriented president, had one of the most racist administrations existing. Let's tell it like it is. He would give out important, like public housing was one thing, and homelessness was a real major problem during that particular day. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt built public housings for the poor all over the country. And my little city of Chester was, I would say, at least 40% approximate of the housing was public housing. And it was totally segregated. If you were white, you lived in a Catholic village. If you were black, you lived in the Roofdale Bedded Home of William Penn. Totally, completely segregated. Now, it was segregated before the public housing was built, but it was totally segregated. And Chester itself was a very segregated town, not only in terms of public housing, but also in terms of employment, education. And you didn't make out any better in Harrisburg. You had William Howard Day projects, public housing that was Black. And back in those days, you had Hall Manor, which was white. One individual that was really instrumental in knocking down those barriers of discrimination and segregation, and knocking down those barriers of housing was Homer C. Floyd. Homer C. Floyd came in 1970 to the Harrisburg area. I think he was from Kansas, but he had been director of an agency out in the Middle West, and he came in and instituted a program attacking racism and discrimination in not only public housing, but also in industry. And this is statewide. He was executive director of the Human Relations Commission, and he made a real dent in this program. And don't think he didn't get backlash, because he was attacked and constantly challenged by even members of his own board. They did not like the idea that a black man would come in and enforce the law the way it should be enforced. But Homer Floyd was a man that stood tall and took care of it. I was pleased to work with Homer on many issues and many problems. We consider him a friend, a fellow brother in the struggle for equal opportunity and justice. NAACP worked very closely with Homer Floyd. I had the pleasure of being the vice president of the NAACP Harrisburg chapter many years ago under the president of Jessica Butler, who was a stalwart woman, a very active woman, who was to be active to this very day. Wonderful person. But we had some issues, and we continue to have issues in this whole problem of equal opportunity and affirmative action. So let me just name just a few people in Harrisburg. And I go back to the day, because remember, if we don't raise up our folks who have been committed to equal opportunity, then who in the world is going to do it? Another person, a name that probably has been long forgotten by many people, is a young man by the name of David Patterson. Comes from a large Harrisburg family. John Patterson and others in his family were very active in the civil rights struggle. But David Patterson, my friend, a young man who I mentored and worked with, we organized a group called the Youth for the Advancement of Black Students, or YABS. And David Patterson was the president. But I worked with David Patterson, but Patterson didn't need my guidance, because he had a brain of his own, brilliant young man. He was able to develop relationships with people like for instance, Milton Shaft. He was very close to Milton Shaft. He was able to develop a relationship with the president of Penn State, and was able to develop scholarships for students, for Black students at Penn State. David Patterson was a wonderful young man, and David and some of the others, and the Davis brothers and others in Harrisburg. When Martin Luther King died in 1968, we organized at the Hill Community Center, and that's where I was working as the director at that time, a march. I had hundreds of students that flooded the streets and came to the Hill Center. I spoke to them, organized them, and they had a march led by the Youth for the Advancement of Black Students. They came from different directions. They came down State Street, they walked up 6th Street, and they met at what was then City Hall, and made presentations to the mayor. They did that. I didn't lead the march. My thing was to organize and create leadership and not jump in front of the line myself. And I supported and worked with David. But David made a demand that he presented to the mayor at that point. We also helped to organize it. We worked with Reverend Franklin Henry, another man whose heart was in the right place, a local pastor who was head of the Ministerial Association, city of Harrisburg. Reverend Henry organized a march to the Capitol and a program to shall we say, honor the death and the honor the life and the journey of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It was 1968, I think it was April, when Dr. King had been killed in Memphis, Tennessee. So he organized that march. These are local people who fought hard in the city of Harrisburg. I was honored to be one of the keynote speakers at that march, but there were thousands of people there. many, many years and years ago. And we were able to make some presentations. We talked about some of the issues, the major issues that were confronting people at that time. Uh, that during that time we had the 1964 Civil Rights Act that had been passed and signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson of Sutherland. Uh, Johnson did and signed in a lot of really, really, really important things. I think he still has some of that racism in his heart, but I tell you one thing, he must have fought it pretty hard because he probably accomplished more legislatively than any other president in our history. JFK put forth the idea of ending racism and discrimination. But the man who really implemented the program was his vice president, and later who became president after John Fitzgerald Kennedy had been assassinated, was Lyndon Baines Johnson. He also established what we would call a community action program, a community development program, which all over the nation, poor people were given the opportunity to organize uh, to stop racism and discrimination, government funded. See, it was like a tale of two cities. On one hand, we had an FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, whose name appears on the building in Washington, D.C., who had a systematic uh, uh, fight against individuals in the civil rights movement. He considered some of the civil rights activities the greatest threat to the United States, but actually was the greatest support and help to the United States that helped to improve a lot of poor people. And the one person that really pushed it in a way I don't understand is by on one hand, we had an FBI that had under surveillance all the civil rights leaders and were complicit in some of the assassinations of some of these leaders. And on the other hand, you had a president who funded organizations that uplifted programs to help the civil rights movement. If it wasn't for the community action program, I can tell you, my career would have been totally different. But I credited the community action program. One was the Greater Chester movement in Chester, Pennsylvania, and the other was in Harrisburg, the Commonwealth and Perry County Commission on Equal Opportunity for giving me the opportunity to organize groups. And I did organize groups to fight against discrimination. One such group was called Ghetto Enterprise. Ghetto Enterprises was an organization that I helped put together, and with the help of ministers such as Dr. Orville Eiffel, who became a national figure and is also a prominent member of the AME Church that helped us. The Reverend Clement, pastor of Bethel AME Church in the city of Harrisburg, Reverend Jefferson Wright, who was the pastor of Second Baptist Church. We worked together to bring about change in Harrisburg. And I want to give some of the white churches credit because the Lutheran Church, Messiah Lutheran, and some of the others helped to present money and funds to keep us afloat, to keep us doing things. We set up that organization and we hired an executive director to help coordinate. And that was Ted Holmes. Ted Holmes was the chairman of Congress of Racial Equality for the city of York. We had a lot of our leadership came out of the city of York who faced a riotous situation and a very difficult situation there. And later on in our show, we're going to lift up some information. A gentleman by the name of Levy wrote a book on the history of the 1969 riots in the city of York. We will have that at near the end of our program, the second half, that is. Also, we'll talk about some of the other folks that we mentioned, uh, and that we didn't talk about. Barton Fields, who I understand is still alive, who's back in Philadelphia. Uh, he was originally, I think he's really from the island, but he grew up in Philadelphia, and now he's in assisted living. I think Barton is well up into his 90s. And last I heard, he was still alive. But Barton Fields, who's Barton Fields? Barton Fields was the Secretary of State. He was under uh, under the Casey administration. He was also Secretary of Department of Revenue. Uh, he was locally, he was president of the NAACP, and at one point he held a position that I held, was the chairman of the board of directors of the Cumberland and Perry County Commission on Equal Opportunity. Barton Fields. And Viola Fields was his wife. And Viola Fields, who was killed in an automobile accident in Lang City, was also at one point, president of the NAACP. But Barton Fields did a lot of good. He was something. He also was a recruiter, and he went all over the country recruiting school teachers, and bring them to the Harrisburg School District, because at the time, the Harrisburg School District did not have many people of color. Well, Barton Fields, who lived in the city of Harrisburg, was an intricate part of this community, was also a man who was extremely capable, communicated very, very, very well, and was honored and shall we say, respected uh, by the leadership. Uh, One thing about his work within the Casey administration, I was blessed to be Casey's statewide director of minority business enterprise, contract compliance, and equal opportunity. I worked for Casey myself, but Barton was one of the many individuals of color that Casey had pointed into position. And Casey would tell you, he didn't appoint them because they were he appointed them because they were capable and they were the best people. I don't mean to go off when talking about Casey, but no governor before him and since then has come close to doing what Casey did. The thing I love about Casey is that he would stand tall. His strength, unbelievable strength. And when he would say, "What did you do when you had a chance to do it?" It just it's that's amazing thing uh, in terms of the kinds of things that Casey did. Uh, 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 and let me just, matter of fact, I got something here that I put the poem that I had written, and I'm going to mention it because I'm going to tell you like this. It's Black History Month, and we're talking about prominent Black leadership and things to do. But there were individuals who happened. Casey was Irish. He was a man that worked in the coal mines and got his law degree. But when he came up to doing it, things he did. Here's a poem I wrote, and I'm going to read it to you. Living up to the promise of a dream. There are those who talk about how things are supposed to be, but never act. They sing about love, but never give. They cry about oppression, but fail to bring about change. You have done those things that others only talk about with courage. You have opened the doors of opportunity for others, healthcare for children, business opportunities for everyone, job opportunity for those who otherwise would be left behind. Your own courage in facing a bigoted public and a body racked with problems. Set example for all to follow. When your light was dim and we thought we might lose you and you leave this earth, you stood still and tall with God as your guide. You continue to live and to live honorably You still smell the flowers and drink the waters from mountain streams. You kiss your grandchildren and marvel at your son's success. Yes, there are those who talk about how things are supposed to be, but never act. You have replaced words and deeds. All men must share in God's word. The promised land is ahead. You have found the answer to life, living up to the promise of a dream. Uh, and Casey did that. David Owens, head of correction. Barton Field, head of department of revenue. Ron Sharp, the first black commissioner of state police in the country. And I can go on. Mary Lethbridge, because was a superintendent at one of my penal institutions. She had up Muncie and then Chester three institutions. I can go on and on about the individuals, African Americans who are very capable and who brought justice and equal opportunity in their position. They did it and they did it to death. It was wonderful, the opportunity that was presented. And we had local leadership. You know, one thing we used to get a lot of criticism from some folks from Philadelphia who would come in and say, "Oh, Harrisburg is not doing anything." Harrisburg did a lot. Harrisburg was on the mark. People, and now you got to realize the character and the culture of this town. First of all, it's a capital city, and your number one employer in a capital city is the state government. As a matter of fact, the largest employer in the state, the single employer, the state government. Now, the largest industry is agriculture, but employees, in terms of numbers, work for state government. So, in order to do make an impact on the employment situation in the state, you had to make an impact within the state. So I was given the responsibility. I reported directly to one of to Jack Tye, who was Governor Casey's deputy in charge of operations, and so all of the secretaries and heads of the department reported to the government through Jack. But I was given the responsibility of supervising equal opportunity contract compliance officers in all of the departments. Every department, the state government, had someone who is either assigned equal opportunity responsibilities or a separate department in office within itself because of the size of the department. And so I was given the responsibility of supervising this program and writing and defining this program. And I've been in this job for 25 years, never had the kind of support that I got within the Casey administration. That's a fact. And we had to fight. The biggest fought against us. I don't want you to think it was easy. We had some people in high level positions who will have one face for the government and others, and so they're so fair and they're just as racist as they can be. And they fought us and they did other things in the background to try to destroy us and try to make sure it didn't happen. But so you needed that program. You needed a plan that would help to bring down those racist individuals and to at least to bring about change within this department. And some people who had very, very, very key spots and who were supposed to be on top of this thing were our worst enemies. And that's a fact. But so when you talk about Black history, it's not just in one area. We had problems everywhere. Racism and discrimination is systematic, but it was ingrained in the culture of this country and throughout the world. We have people who whole approach, no matter, and even some of the so-called liberals that support us could not accept it as their equal. Even if they extended their helping hand, that helping hand was because they felt that we couldn't do it for ourselves, that we were basically inferior because they had been taught that Blacks, people of color, are inferior. So we're up against a wall that had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so, and many of us paid a price. I paid a price because there's going to be resistance, and there was resistance. So when you talk about African American history or Black history, and you talk about leadership, why does your leadership have to be clearly defined on struggle? Slavery, not considering people as human beings, 3/5 of a man. It was an uphill battle. And I'm gonna tell you, we have not reached the mountaintop yet. King, you said we will reach the mountaintop. Well, I tell you what, we don't have a choice, brother. We just have to keep climbing and climbing and climbing. And one day we will reach the mountaintop. Because racism and discrimination, sexism, is all a part of the basic culture that we have to fight. And this includes other minorities. They had organizations that were developed, such as the Ku Klux Klan, that not only did they hate African Americans, Black, but any person of color was discriminated against. The Ku Klux Klan not only hated Blacks, but hated Jews. And watch this, they hated Catholics. And the Catholic Church is the largest Christian church in the world. Hear me talk. They hated Catholics. And people talk about the burning and the lynching of African Americans, but they don't talk to you about some of the lynchings of Jews and how they were pushed out in this country. I'm not talking about necessarily in Israel. So when we set forth our direction toward emancipation and making men free, it also designs a plan that others could follow in order to fight for freedom, justice, and equality. And the fortunate thing is that sometimes, like for example, the creation of the NAACP in 1909 under the leadership of Du Bois, also joined together with Jewish leadership to make it happen. And no, I do not go along with anyone that wants to attack people because of their ethnicity, whether it be Jewish, whether it be Hindu, or whatever. I do not. If you want to end racism, you cannot be a racist. If you want to end discrimination, you cannot discriminate yourself. And this old elitist class thing that some Blacks hold within the community has to stop, and it's still there. Sometimes based on color, sometimes based on privilege, sometimes based on money. The basic thing that individuals need is unity, is pulling themselves together, as a people to get the job done. You can't hate someone because they're light skinned and got curly hair. You can't hate someone because they're dark skinned and got nappy hair. You don't look at what the person looks at. And you love them no matter what. We hope the content of a person's character and who they are will define who they are, more so than what color they are or what positions they have. And some people are hung up on college degrees. Our new governor has signed a law using experience and training along with education, but not using education as a barrier for getting talented and very capable people. And that's what we've been doing. We're putting barriers in our way to bring about change and to bring about justice and to bring about equality. It is very, very important that we look at this thing. One other issue that we've had to look at is the training of our police force. We are blessed to have some very, very capable police officers that are in the line of duty, know how to treat all people and treat them equally, to realize that they are the protectors of the law. And because a person happens to have a skin that is black and happen to be male or of a certain age, he's not your enemy. And you don't have the right to kill that person, abuse that person, and beat them into submission. And don't think and not think that we're not coming back at you. We have laws in this country that tell you got to treat people equally, but using the law that we're supposed to be enforcing. We want to also make sure that our police officers have the salaries that they deserve, to have the recognition that they deserve, and also have the training they deserve, because they are servants of the people. They are public servants, and they work for us. So we want the best for them, because they have families and children, that kind of thing. But we also don't want our young men to be caught between the gangsters and the cops and know which was your friend and which is your enemy. We don't really want that. Let me share something here with you. Another brief poem. The enemy within. They expanded their police and increased the power of their weapons. They set their sights on the poor and blamed them for the violence in the nation. They added money for new jails and restored the death penalty. We must stop crime, they said, to protect our women and our children. They declared war on the innocent and set up cages to herd them in. But it was all the time some of their own children who attacked them, revolted against authority, shot down teachers and fellow students. Their own children had access to the weapons that kill and destroy. While the system kept watch over the poor, middle-class youth lashed out in spite of their resources, in spite of the attention and material things they were given. They still feel unloved and unwanted. Their parents blame the poor for all the world's misdeeds. And when all along they were creating in their own homes their greatest threat to their way of life. I'm saying that we have to realize that we can't stereotype and assume that there's something wrong or they're the enemy because they happen to have dark skin and they happen to be black, or they happen to be male, or they happen to be female. You know, we can't do that. And you can't assume that a person is absolutely pure because he's white. It just really, really, really doesn't work out that way. So we set up program and we set up government. We elect officials who care about everybody. We appoint individuals who are responsible, who would approach things in a systematic way to try to uplift people, the downtrodden. And you're not evil because you're poor, not at all. Could be just the opposite. I'm going to share with you now a video that I just saw the other day. And I think it was presented and made by the Historical Society in Europe. We did not create the video. Don't take responsibility for it. But it's a wonderful video, and with their blessing, hopefully we're going to show just some of it. Gentlemen who had published a book on the 1969 revolt in the city of York. And let me just say that York was a place that had a lot of issues. There, a lot of right wing and racists that were in York. '69 was a really horrible year. So we're going to show some of that video, and then we'll be back. We'll be back soon. Okay. All right then.
Good morning. Good. My name is Christian Murgy. I'm the manager of public programs with the York County History Center. So thank you so much for coming out to our February edition of Second Saturday. So today is Dr. Peter Levy. He was a full professor in the Department of History and Political Science at York College of Pennsylvania, where he taught courses on recent America, civil rights movement, and the race and justice until his retirement last spring. He is the author of over a dozen books, including The Great Uprising, Race Riots in Urban America during the 1960s, as well as numerous articles and essays, including Revisiting York's Revolts, which was published in the Journal of York County Heritage in 2019. He was been the recipient of a number of awards, including the York College Professional Service and Leadership Award in 2012, and has participated in 3 NEH summer seminars. While he was born and raised in California, he has lived in Towson, Maryland since he began teaching in New York in 1989. Drawing on his recently published book, The Great Uprising, Race Riots in Urban America, Dr. Peter Levy will present an overview of the causes and consequences of York's revolt, in addition to providing a framework for better understanding York's and well over 300 revolts that took place during the 1960s. Levy hopes to stimulate a discussion of why it is important to examine them rather than hide the uncomfortable parts of our past. So, without further ado, Dr. Peter Levy.
Thank you, Christian. You're welcome. And I think that's all we need to say. You just summarized it. And first, I want to thank people for coming out. Which is a real pleasure here, as I have at least a couple of former students. I didn't even recognize Scott at first. And that's, always been a pleasure. I always enjoy teaching. I have to admit, I'm a little surprised I've retired and I'm not missing teaching as much as I thought I would. But for 40 years, I taught 35 plus at York, and to have some of my star students continue on with the flame of history is really great. I also want to thank the History Center for inviting me here. I did a good deal of the research for at least the York part of the book here, going through microfilm in an age before there was newspapers.com and there's no indexes, where all you would do is go like this in a microfilm machine. If you were lucky, the printer worked, but at 50 cents a page, I have a lot of real scratchy notes. In fact, just this week, by a total accident, or just serendipitously, the son of someone I talk about in this book found this book and called me up. And we had a really nice conversation, but I discovered that I misspelled his father's name. His name was Lionel, and I think I spelled 2 L's rather than 1 L at the, and it's probably because I have the worst handwriting, and I probably wrote his name down, Lionel with 2 L's, or couldn't read it. So if there ever is another edition, hopefully to make those corrections. As Christian said, my goal today is really to try to provide first a bigger context and framework for understanding the race revolts that took place in the United States during the 1960s into the early 1970s. And then about 2-3 slides in, I will start to focus in on York to see the degree to which I think it fits the mold, or fits the pattern, or doesn't. I realize this for some people is a difficult topic. This is, we don't It's Black History Month, and you know, even within those for now 100 years have been promoting the idea of first Black History Week, and then Black History Month. I think there's been a tension between, do we use it to kind of build up to have celebratory moments, or do we also look at the underside of history? So this is a little bit more of an underside of history topic. So Christian's going to do a little sleight of hand here. I did a few changes here. We're going to do a little ad-libbing. So after I wrote this book, I also put together, with the help of a computer scientist, a website. So can we get the website up? And I think the website helps here. So between roughly 1964 and 1970, the United States experienced, and here I'm going to read from the introduction of my book, over 700 urban revolts. Upwards of 525 cities were affected, including nearly everyone with a Black population over 50,000. The two largest waves of uprisings came during the summer of 1967 and during the Holy Week in 1968, following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. In those 2 years alone, 125 people were killed, nearly 7,000 were injured, and approximately 45,000 arrests were made. And property damage topped 127 million, or approximately $1 billion in today's dollars. And this does not take into account a large wave of prison revolts and racially oriented unrest at the nation's high schools. Considered collectively, with the advantage of hindsight, these revolts constituted what I call the Great Uprising, a term neither contemporary pundits and social scientists nor historians have employed till recently. Like the Great War and the Great Depression, the Great Uprising was one of the central developments of modern American history. And so if you Google Great Uprising website, and just be careful what returns you get, you might find this. You might find this website, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of cool. I have a lot of students help me with this in terms of digging up data. You know, you can go to any one of the dots, and if they work, so if you went to Lancaster, or Harrisburg, or Carlisle, or York, so those are 4 cities just in the region that had some form of revolt, what you probably will find is a little synopsis of roughly, you know, 1 or 2 paragraphs that just tries to provide the, you know, what took place, largely pulled from local newspapers. And then there are other parts of the website in which there's kind of a historiography of the understanding of race revolts and the like. So I just thought I would share that with you, so we can go back to the main stuff, and then Christian's relieved from his technical duties.
It's on the bottom side.
Yes, I want to go
Down.
Thank you. Sorry. So before I focus on York's revolt, let me briefly explain how I came to this broader project. So over 20 years ago, I was looking for a project, and I wanted to write about the civil rights movement, and I said I wanted to do it on a single community. This is actually about a year or two before I came to York in 1989. And I decided, for a variety of reasons, to look at a city called Cambridge, Maryland. And one of the reasons I chose Cambridge, Maryland is I had learned that there had been an infamous riot there when a person named H. Rap Brown gave a fiery address. He was accused of inciting this riot. And matter of fact, this event, for those who, I think most in this audience, Jamie's a historian, so she might know, but the rest of you maybe were alive, actually was in many ways responsible for the rise of Spiro Agnew, who was at the time just a first-term governor, to becoming vice president of the United States. So he became governor in 1966. Within 2 years, he was getting the nomination to be Nixon's vice president. And for those of us who remember when McCain nominated Palin, people were wondering who Palin was. With Agnew, it was even worse. It was really like, Agnew who? That was almost a headline. Well, Agnew had made himself famous by going from being a traditional Rockefeller moderate Republican, essentially he won because of the black vote, to a voice of the new right. In fact, I still hear echoes of Agnew all the time today. But he was a little more respectable than Wallace because he had come from more moderate roots, and he went after H. Rap Brown. So I did a study at Cambridge. Out of that, I was invited then to be part of a group that was going to look at racial revolts that had taken place in Baltimore in 1968. Now, the revolts that are most famous that everyone most has heard of, Watts, Los Angeles, 1965, Newark and Detroit in 1967. Baltimore had one of the largest revolts following King's assassination in 1960 and 68. But I moved to Baltimore. I lived there for 20 years. Never knew that Baltimore had a revolt, but it was quite serious. 50,000 National Guard were brought into Baltimore. That's a pretty serious event. So 40 years afterwards, the University of Baltimore wanted to examine what took place in Baltimore. So I became part of a group that held conference, ultimately wrote a book that had a series of essays on it. Meanwhile, I'm teaching at York. So I started in 1989. The first inkling I ever got of York, not a Yorker, grew up in California, as Kristen said, and New York. Was from a fellow student of mine, a woman named Karen Rice. And some of you may even know Karen. Karen is in charge of the library special collections archives at York College. She was a non-traditional student. She said, "Can I write my senior seminar paper on York?" Right, but she had a caveat. She says, "I want to do an oral history. I can't tell you the names of the people I'm interviewing." Okay, I'll let you do it, but why? And she kind of said, "Well, it's still kind of dangerous to talk about this. This is a hush hush topic. We don't discuss this." And meanwhile, a number of years later, Charlie Robertson, who was the mayor of the city, is arrested and charged in relationship to charge with a murder of Lily Valal during the revolt of 1969. He had been a police officer, and what had been a hush-hush topic becomes not just local news or national news, but literally, papers from Australia are starting to cover York, Pennsylvania. And so I had other students who had started getting interested. So in many ways, much of my work on York, grew out of probably 2 or 3 different student theses who went through newspapers, did oral histories, and dug around and got me interested in writing about York as well. And out of this, ultimately, I decided to propose a book, which became The Great Uprising, which would use these 3 separate incidents to try to have a better understanding of the revolts at large. And it may seem like a strange selection, but I could come up with a rationalization for anything, but I thought it was a good one, which was Cambridge was a small city, roughly under 20,000. York was a mid-sized community, and Baltimore was a large community. They also had kind of different racial makeups in terms of percentage of the Black population, and ultimately was able to convince a publisher that made sense. That's kind of how it works. So anyway, we move on. Got the right arrow here. So I had 3 primary questions, and they weren't particularly original questions. The questions were: what took place, why did the riots take place, and what should be done, or in my case, what was done. These are the questions that the Kerner Commission, which President Johnson had established in the wake of the 1967 riots, had charged the commission with answering. And the Kerner Report is a famous document. And I it's quite a very interesting collection of both scholars and politicians who were part of the Kerner Commission. Probably the most important politician on the commission was a guy named John Lindsay, who was the Republican mayor of New York. It's called the Kerner Commission because Kerner was the Republican governor from the state of Illinois at the time, so the bipartisan people. But it also had a bevy of social scientists who were doing most of the research. So these are the questions I was hoping, if I looked at these 3 cities, and we're going to look at York in trying to answer them. What is can I give an objective discussion or description of the sequence of events that took place in these communities, and larger why? Why did it take place? Could we find certain patterns? When I began my research, there were essentially 2 schools of thoughts, or 2 interpretations, 2 broad views in terms of that second question. Why? On the one hand, one was captured by this book written by a man named Eugen Methvin. Now, Methvin may not be a name that many of us know, and I don't know it. In fact, he was a quite popular author at the time. Often appeared in Reader's Digest. So this is a broad public audience, but there are also scholars who had views that dovetailed with Methvin. And his views encapsulated by the title of his book, The Riot Makers. That riots were made by agitators, by radicals, by outside outside agitators often. But in addition to people who were looting or burning or on the streets, they were people who were apolitical, who were not part of the civil rights movement, who were rioting largely, as Edward Banfield put it, for the fun and profit of it. You know, something happened and this was an opportunity to get a TV, to get some free booze. They weren't politicized at all. There was no kind of reason aside for opportunity. The Kerner Commission, in contrast, came to the conclusion, and they used the word civil disorders, they used the word riots, that the disorders grew out of social conditions that the majority of Black Americans faced at the time, and made the argument that we were moving toward two societies, one Black, one white, separate but unequal and unequal. It disagreed, it looked for, actually, when Johnson appointed the Kerner Commission, he expected to find that radicals had caused the riots. It didn't find evidence of that. It took testimony from everyone from J. Edgar Hoover to police officers, so they had plenty of information. Now, Hoover was unwilling at the time to reveal that had already kind of begun surveillance programs in the Black communities, including spying on Martin Luther King. It was actually the revolts that sparked the turning up of that and creating something known as COINTELPRO, Black Hate Program, which went beyond just gathering information, but actually trying to undermine the civil rights movement. But there was really no evidence that radical agitators had caused this. In fact, one of the things that I found or argued in my book, that H. Rap Brown, who was the poster boy for a Black radical who had caused a riot because he had gone to Cambridge and said, if this town don't come around, we should burn down. And a fire started later that evening, so it certainly looked like he had caused a riot. I hadn't caused that riot. In fact, and the Kerner Commission knew that. They had the records of the state troopers minute by minute, hour by hour. Brownsville had finished around 10. Nothing happened until about 1 o'clock. Brown was long out of town. They couldn't put out the fire. Fire department really did not like the civil rights activists. I was with them for 10 years and just refused to put out the fire, and the fire grew. And the Kerner Commission knew this and left it out of the report. And it actually took me till I wrote this book that I figured that out. It just they had some stuff on Cambridge, but they just left this stuff out. It just that was too dangerous. So already, as it was, Johnson just kind of took the Kerner Commission report and threw it away. This was political trouble. So those kind of were the two theories that most people had. And we actually find that at the time and today, while scholars by and large tend toward the Kerner Commission's interpretation, the public still holds the view of Eugene Metcalfe. That is, it's outside agitators who cause riots, and riots are not political acts. So I just have these two polls. One is from 1968 and asks the question, the conclusion of the committee was that the nation was moving to two societies. Do you agree or disagree? And we see that nationwide, 51% of Americans said, no, we're not two societies. We're not moving in that direction.
We're going to we're going to have to curtail. We're coming down to the end of the program. I want the Historical Society. I want to lift them up, and you've done a wonderful job in putting together this video. And folks that want to see the rest of it can go online and take a look at the entire video. So it's almost 2 hours long. It's an excellent piece of material. This Dr. Levy does a wonderful job. We're coming down to the end of our show. I try to lift up and let people know that we still down at 35 South 8th Street in the city of Lebanon. This is a picture. This is something we still have oils. We have original paintings, 4-foot giraffes, cats, original oil paintings that we have. Come down and take a look at us and give us your support. I kid you not. We also have brief presentations to explain to them the history of each item. We have ivory statues that are 2 or 3 feet tall that are from Kenya. We have masks that are from the Cameroon. So we go through the history And so come down, bring your children. We also have some beautiful garments, African garments. You may have a special occasion where you could use an African garment, and you don't need a special occasion to wear because they're absolutely gorgeous. All of that, and we are asking you to give us your support so we can also give others, and we can continue to pay for this broadcast. So, you know, it takes money to do this. You know, this is not something that's volunteer. People make a living. So give us a hand so we can continue to do what we're doing and presenting information on what is happening. We just don't have enough time really to present everything that we would like to present. All I want to say is, and there are more shows coming. We have a show that's coming up pretty near the end of the month on the Jackson family. So we got other things that we want to present to you, but it costs money to do that. So we would appreciate any purchase, and we're not asking folks to make donations. We're not asking for donations. We're not lifting it up. We're business folks. We want you to buy something. So that way you get something and we get something at the same time. We're not charitable. We are entrepreneurial. And we're blessed to be in a position to do so. Come on down to Lebanon. They have free parking, 2-hour parking in the back of the building. They have a whole slew of new what we call stands. We got Mexican food now, wonderful, wonderful Mexican food. We have poetry. We have Japanese food. We have soul food. This market is a diverse market. We have Blacks, we have Asians, we have Mexicans, we have different people doing different things, and we invite everyone. And one white lady asked me, "Do you sell to white people?" To me, it's amazing someone would even need to ask that question. We sell to, if you're human or even if you're a robot, we will sell to you. Don't make no difference what your race is. Matter of fact, if you're not Black, we encourage you to buy it. Because there's historical stuff that you can learn. And plus, we just like people. We love people. We love people. I don't care what their ethnicity is, whether they're white, whether they're Irish, whether they're Black. It doesn't matter. We want to pull people together. And you know what? Our basic theme is love. We got to learn how to love ourselves, and we have got to learn how to love others. Or where will this world be headed to? It's all about love. It's all about desire. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for everything that you're doing, my man. Continue the good job. Continue to lift up the same banner. And let's continue to develop and to do these shows. Thanks a lot, and God bless. Until next week, may heaven smile upon you, your friend and your neighbor, Richard James. Take care now. So long. Bye-bye. Thank you again for tuning in to the Richard James Show. Our African and our African American programs are set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. We thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let us hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. Until I see you again next week and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.
You're listening to The Voice 17104.